Hello. Why study theology? There are as many answers to that question as there are theologians. And with me today I have a very eminent Greek Orthodox theologian from the University of Winchester, Dr. Andreas Andreopoulos. And I want to try and get his take on what it is we are doing when we work as theologians. Andreas, welcome to Nottingham.
Thank you very much, Tom. It's always a joy to come and speak with you.
Why are you a theologian?
Why is any of us a theologian? The first answer that we can give is that unfortunately we need theology. Unfortunately we need theologians. It would be wonderful if we didn't need to study what we do. Now, one of the ways that have been used extensively to describe philosophy, but I think it applied in early Christianity to theology as well, is the Platonic definition. What is philosophy? It is the study of death. Theology is, I think it's opposite. Not the study of death, but the study of love. It is the way that will allow us to understand what is our relationship between, with the love of God. What is our relationship with God? Now, this is something that we unfortunately need to study. Unfortunately means that we have already failed. When we live it, when we see people in the early church, they didn't need to study theology. They lived it. They practiced it. They were present in front of God. But since the world has become a little more complex since then, since the church and the liturgical tradition, our theological and spiritual traditions, have become a little more complex since then, we need to know that we get things right. We need to know that what we do, and of course, we should never forget that theology serves our spiritual life, not the other way around, that what we do will actually lead us where we need to go. Now, what is that? A friend of mine from a different tradition is asked sometimes, why do we need to know theology? And his answer is that if we don't, people die. Well, referring, of course, to religious wars and differences between cultures and traditions. If I may be allowed, I'll be a little blunt about this. So what? We'll all die. Perhaps more tragically, perhaps more unfortunately, perhaps in a way that doesn't help the world from a social point of view, but that doesn't change anything. I think the answer to why study theology, why do theology, is much deeper than that. Theology tries, hopefully, to serve spiritual life. And the point there is not just to live a good moral life. Anybody can do that. We don't need theology to tell us how to live a just, moral, balanced life. In fact, many people who are not theologians, who are not Christians, who are not believers in anything, live perfectly good, moral and upstanding lives, very principled lives. That's not it. What we need theology for, not so that the world will become a more peaceful place, hopefully it will, but the ultimate goal is that we are saved, or that we are united with God, that we do not forget that our existence is not just what we can see at this level. We are not only what we can see at the level of social interaction and commerce and exchange of nice words and social alliances and all that, but we do not forget that we have an unseen quality as well, which leads us, which connects us with the uncreated, which connects us with God. And every manual of Orthodox theology that I have in mind starts with this question: what is theology? Well, first of all, it's that which connects us with the uncreated. It's the study of the connection, of the union between what is created and what is uncreated. Okay, this is perhaps correct from a theological, systematic point of view. It's a little dry, but it really means the same thing. It is a way for us to try to study the love of God. The spiritual life, of course, is the practice of the love for God, the love in God. Theology is something that we need so that we can know how to serve God better in our churches, in our life, in our spiritual prayer, in all of the above.
So, in other words, you see theology more as an activity than a body of doctrine.
The doctrine is a confession of failure. We realize that something doesn't work naturally. And for this reason, we need to place a fence around what we do, around our practice, around our faith. There are many things that our doctrine does not cover, which are extremely important. We don't have theological formulations for exactly the process in which we are saved. We don't have theological formulations for what happens, or doctrines for exactly what happens after death. We don't have theological decisions, doctrines, for how exactly we're judged. And all the greatest theologians tried to avoid areas which were not, or could not be approached intellectually only. Whenever it was necessary, whenever there was a division in the body of the church, then theologians stayed out of it. Then representatives of Eucharistic communities, using the theology that was provided to them, came together to exchange their experiences. Now, why is that important? We see that in councils, in synods, it's bishops who take place, not theologians. This is important because they take place as transmitters, if you wish, of the Eucharistic liturgical experience of their own communities, not as people who are smarter than others. Theology serves around them, of course. It's part of the theological experience itself. We need theology in the air, but the theological meeting at the level of bishops reminds us that all this is done at the level of the Eucharistic gathering, not of the kind of theology which is modeled after philosophy.
There's a hint in what you're saying to us that theology has to recognize its own limits and has to recognize it must keep there must be places where it keeps this reverent silence.
Many of the greatest theologians, when they were asked about difficult theological matters, gave 2 or 3 different directions for answers, and then they used that expression, let's pass the rest in silence. Now, the question of limits. If we approach theology, if we practice it as we mostly do nowadays, in a way that is similar to philosophy, then by all means we should realize that it has limits, and we should not try to approach them. But in the measure that we see theology as part of the spiritual life, if we apply the understanding that was still prevalent in the early Christian centuries, I pray correctly and therefore I am a theologian, and I am a theologian and therefore I pray correctly, which of course is attributed to Evagrius, but we see as a way of life for many people.
We in the West attribute it to Prosper of Aquitaine, actually.
This shows us that perhaps we're not doing justice to theology when we're reducing it to the level of philosophy. There's much more to what theology can offer, and perhaps this direction, because it's about a direction that we speak of, can reveal more to us if we think of theology as poetry rather than only as systematic philosophy.
On that rather poetic note, I'll just say thank you very much for sharing with us your vision of the role and importance of theology.
Thank you very much, Tom. It's always a great pleasure for me to come here.
Thanks, Andreas.